Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next comic slash graphic novel review. This one is going to be for The Nameless City by Faith Erin Hicks. So art and story by Faith Erin Hicks, and the colouring on the art is by Jordi Belair. And yeah, first question you're obviously asking is why are you reviewing this seemingly random graphic novel on your channel? The main reason is because I think this is a book that a lot of Avatar fans would really like. Especially if you like the Avatar comics as they are now, I think you'll like this because the name Faith Erin Hicks may be familiar to Avatar fans because of this free comic that came out a few years back. Obviously, the artist on this one was Faith Erin Hicks. This is the free comic book Shells, and it was pretty well received. You know, I ultimately don't think it's the best story for the free comic, that it's fairly basic, but the art was nice, and I'd kind of kept track of I think I followed Faith Erin Hicks on Tumblr, and I've roughly kind of kept an eye on what she's been doing. And this book, especially in the last couple of weeks, months, hearing that it was coming out fairly soon, I did have my eye on it because I'd seen her post about it kind of as she's been kind of going through doing the art and stuff like that, and I've been interested, but I never really looked into it. But hearing that it was like literally coming out, I kind of read the preview pages, checked when it was actually going to be out for me to buy, and yeah, it came out today in my local comic book store, and I picked it up. So that's basically the reason why I'm reviewing it, because after reading it, I was I think, in my opinion, correct about this being a book that I think a lot of Avatar fans would like. And it's kind of telling as well because look who the primary review is on the cover. It says right there at the top, Brian Konietzko, astonishing Brian Konietzko, Avatar: The Last Airbender. So he's one of the key reviews on this book. I think part of that is also because his graphic novel series Thread Worlds is also going to be published by the same publisher as this, First Second Books. So you can sort of see why they're using their kind of various people to kind of give reviews for the other books. But it's definitely one I think Avatar fans will like. So yeah, here's the cover. Of course, gives you an idea of like, okay, kind of Eastern, kind of Asian inspired town. Obviously Faith Erin Hicks kind of trademark style of art. On the back we just get some kind of information about the book, and then the spine is quite nice as well. Hicks, The Nameless City. And it's the first of, as far as I'm aware, 3 books that are coming out. And that's pretty impressive because, as you can see, it's a fairly thick book. Like, ultimately, like, it's kind of, Avatar: The Last Airbender kind of comic sized, in that, like, it's smaller than the size of a normal comic. And this is the hardcover. It is also available in paperback as well, but I didn't see that in my local comic book store. The paperback may have a slightly separate release date or what, but I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, I got the hardback, and yeah, 232 pages, and then there's a couple of pages of concept art at the end. So like you get like 235, 240 pages of content in this book. I paid, I think, 22 euros for it, and that's the exact price in the back. 21.99 US, 24.99 Canadian, and I think you can get it for a little bit cheaper on Amazon. And then again, if you go for the paperback version, that'll be even cheaper again. I'll get into explaining what exactly this book is in just a moment, but let's quickly just look at the quality of the book. As I said, it's a hardcover, pretty thick book. On the inside and kind of cover, back and front, you get this interesting map of kind of the area where the story is taking place, which is actually very important because obviously the title of the book is The Nameless City, and the kind of geography and that sort of thing is very important to kind of what's going on. And it's just really nicely kind of put together, and you can see a couple of pages there. It's really well done. Now, what is the premise for this story? The premise is, it basically is all about the Nameless City. It is this city which obviously is nameless, but That's not the full story. The Nameless City is what the natives of this city call it. It also has like many other names because of the geographical location of this city. It's a city that tends to get conquered a lot. A lot of the big nations from around try to conquer this as a way to kind of control trade, control the kind of wealth of the general area where kind of a couple of the nations are. And the reason for that is because you can sort of see just from the map there this huge kind of mountain that separates basically most of the landmass on this side of the world from the ocean. And there is this one kind of hole from kind of the river, this landmass into the ocean, and that is obviously straight through the Nameless City. So it's a really kind of strategic location because it has that kind of path straight out to the ocean. So if you control that, you kind of control trade from like that section of the world to the other. Um, and so the main kind of three kind of countries, Yisun, Liao, and Dao, all fight for control of the Nameless City, and it's been conquered, reconquered, conquered again so many times that basically there are various generations of people living in the city that call the city a different name because their family, their generation came into this city, and once their generals captured it, they renamed it. Every time it gets captured, it gets renamed. So the first kind of couple of pages of the book kind of just go explaining that like these kind of tourists come to the place and call it as far as they were aware, the city was called Daidu. But then they talked to other people and it was called Yanjing. They talked to other people near the river and it was called Monk, Monkh. And then they talked to the actual guards, who are the people currently in charge of the city, and it's currently being called Dondao. But the natives just say it doesn't have a name. They call it the Nameless City. Because only outsiders name the city, because obviously the natives are so used to it just changing all the time that they don't really care. But that's the concept for the book at a base level. Now the question obviously is then, what's with the two main characters, and how does that concept relate to two fairly young characters? What happens here is that basically even though our character here, Rat, the girl here on the cover, it gets the kind of prime location on the cover, the main character is more Kaidu here, the boy. Now, the key thing that they go for here is that he is a Dao. He is basically part of the nation that took over the city. He has lived most of his life in the Dao homeland, in Dao. He has now decided to leave his homeland and go to the Nameless City, or Dandao as he knows it as, because his father has been working there for years and he's basically never seen his father. That's what's established here. So he's leaving his mother behind, she's in charge of the homeland, and he's come to the Nameless City of his own free will. He wants to meet his father. And basically a lot of the early sections of the book are him just basically interacting with this world. He being part of the kind of group of people who are in control of the city, gets privileges. Obviously, the Dao are in control, so they have all the wealth. They basically establish that the natives and a lot of the people from the kind of who are part of families from the kind of past conquerors are the kind of more poor people in the city, and especially as they later call them, the named, the locals kind of thing, the natives. They are the kind of poorest of the poor. They kind of struggle to survive, struggle to get enough food, and this is part of the, I suppose, main conflict of the book, is in that it's not just this simple case of that the rulers, the Dao, are wrong and they're like abusing the people. It's this kind of weird situation where, to keep control of this town, the Dao are trying to create stability. They're trying to, keep their military might strong enough so that they can defend if another attack comes, because they're kind of thinking, okay, we've been in control of this place for a while now. If another group of people comes in, that's going to affect everyone, our own people, but it's also going to make the situation for the kind of lower classes, the people, the poorest of the poor, even worse. So while you may think we're bad, the stability we're creating is giving you a chance. And if we are allowed to kind of create even more stability, we can help you. That's the kind of idea that's going on here. But then, of course, you have the different people in the Dao kind of military, primarily the general who took over the place for the Dao. He's later on revealed to be a very kind of reasonable man for the most part. I don't think we know everything about him, but he's very much for kind of incorporating the named back into things, whereas his son, who's kind of leading the kind of recruitment of new people into the army, training recruits like Kaidu, he is all about military might, that they have to train people so they're always ready to fight, so they can keep control of the land. And this is where characters like Kaidu's father comes into play, in that Kaidu's father is kind of more thinking that the way we should go is actually to form some sort of a peace treaty between the three great nations to stop the fighting over the named city, which is just causing basically the city to kind of reset itself constantly. That just the people in charge now become the poor people, new kind of elite classes come in, another people take over, the city gets renamed again, and the cycle just continues. Whereas the only way to really help everyone is to kind of incorporate everyone and create some sort of a council. That's what Kaidu's father is going for. And throughout the book, you basically get Kaidu learning a lot of this, that he's come here of his own free will, not because he wants to conquer anything. He doesn't really like fighting, so he's not really too into the kind of warrior training he's doing. He's much more interested in books, and so he obviously begins to investigate, and that's when he comes across our other character, the female character, Rat here. And she is one of these named. She's lived on the streets, and you kind of learn little bits about her as we go on. And the main character kind of focus of the two is basically how they go from being effectively complete opposites that like could never be friends, because for most of the Dao see the named as kind of like they're barely even people. They're just those people who live on the streets, that we shouldn't care about them. We're only focused on being warriors. That's what a lot of like Kaidu's classmates think. Whereas he is actually quite interested in what's going on. Like as he walks through the city with his father, he's seeing these people living on the streets. He's kind of noticing that like, oh, I've just been given this like big batch of food, and they're really struggling over there. He's kind of taking all this in. He's kind of different than a lot of the other people. He's kind of open to it, and you get this whole idea of like he goes out on his own and everyone is against him. The only people that really like the Dao are other Dao, and you get the opposite side of things, where that even though the Dao, as I kind of just explained, are kind of fundamentally trying to create stability and trying to help, but it will take time, most of the people from the other nations, and especially the named, just see them as the kind of conquerors. They're in control, they have all the wealth, the food, the power, and they have nothing. And so they kind of treat the Dao, when they come into their kind of territories, as kind of enemies. And so that's what happens to Kaidu initially, and that's the relationship between Kaidu and Rat initially, that she won't trust him at all because he is Dao. And it's only through these little races and that they have that becomes a kind of key part of their friendship, that she has lived in this place a long time. She's used to kind of traversing the city by like running across the rooftops, making these amazing parkour jumps across the river and stuff like that. Whereas he is quite quick himself, but he's kind of afraid to make some of these big parkour jumps. And so, fundamentally where their friendship starts is that like, I want you to teach me how to run like you do. What do you want in exchange for you teaching me this? And so she basically just says, okay, bring me a bunch of food and I'll teach you. And you kind of get this kind of montage as they go through her teaching him how to run, and her getting the food, and their friendship gradually kind of forming over time. Her realizing that she was being a little bit close-minded with all just saying that all Dao are like that, and you see that she still fundamentally is like that, but when she sees Dao that are willing to, I suppose, talk to her as a person and actually treat her with any sort of respect, she begins to respect them. And throughout this, we learn some of the more emotional aspects of her character. We don't get too heavy into a lot of backstory. We get to meet like Kaido's mother for a little bit in flashback, a little letter that she sent him. We obviously get Kaido's father over the course of the story as well, and stuff like that. But the focus very much is on like kind of Rat kind of realizing that the Dao, especially some of their leaders, aren't so bad. And the main conflict comes in that, of course, a plot is kind of underway to take out the Dao and a new kind of group to take over the city. And now that the Dao are kind of seen as friendly, there's a kind of conflict towards the end of this book. That's about that. I wouldn't say that action, that intrigue plot towards the end is like incredible in this book, in that I think the character development, just the setup of the whole ideals of like both sides, and that the Dao and the Named, and like, are they going to be able to work together? There's factions that do want to work with the locals, there are factions that don't and just want the Dao to be the ones in control and stuff like that. But overall, there's a lot of complex issues dealt with. I don't want to get too heavy into spoilers. I felt like I almost went too much in depth already, but I do think this is a really good book. Like, the reason I think I would recommend this to Avatar fans is because the characters feel so real, in that they have these kind of struggles and the kind of friendships. There's a kind of humor to the friendships. All of the characters feel unique and interesting, and that like Kaido's dad for the most part is extremely laid back, where despite his like kind of high position in the kind of Dao government, Kaido is very kind of book smart, kind of sensitive to a lot of stuff going on. Rad is a bit rough around the edges, but has like a kind of emotional core to her, and just it overall comes together really nicely. I think that the highlight is absolutely just the concept of the Dao in control, the natives, how they kind of see the Dao, and the kind of the issues on both sides because of that, and the various kind of people who want one thing versus people who want another. And the most obvious Avatar comparison I could make is it's somewhat, but not overly similar to the conflict in like The Promise, Yu Dao, that it's part Earth Kingdom, part Fire Nation. What do the leaders make with the decision? Do the Earth Kingdom keep that land, or do the Fire Nation keep that land? What's the decision? The difference here is obviously the situations are different, in that like most of our main characters in Avatar are like the leaders dealing with that, whereas here you have more of the citizens kind of proving that teaming up is better than the opposite of things. So yeah, that's it. And the second book is called, it says here at the back, the second book is called The Stone Heart, book 2 of the Nameless City series. So I'm not sure when exactly that's coming out. Obviously, as far as I'm aware, she fairly recently like finished the art for this. So given that there's like 200 plus pages for each of these books, probably not going to see it for a while. But obviously, of course, you don't want to rush it just to get the whole series out. This is an excellent start, and I'm really excited to see what comes next. It's one of those books where I honestly think it could become super popular if enough people give it a chance. It's just one of those things where, like, because it's from like not one of the big publishers, that it may not get the attention that it perhaps deserves. So I definitely think a lot of Avatar fans should check this out, because obviously, like, Avatar comics are great and all, they come out every so often, but this is another comic like that, and it's related to someone who has done some work in Avatar, so it's somewhat connected. I may do another video where I talk more in depth about the actual story and where I think it's going, some of the lore aspects that are going on here. in terms of history, stuff like that they mentioned. Just a more detailed review that is more kind of story analysis rather than just straight up a book review. Um, I'd like to podcast about it, but I really don't think any of the people in my podcast group are going to have this book, so that probably won't end up happening. But definitely in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. If you've heard about this book before, are you going to get it? Or definitely let me know if this is the first time you are hearing about this book. Once again, it's called The Nameless City, by Faith Erin Hicks primarily. Art and written by her. Published by First Second Books. Out today in comic book stores. I think it might have been out a couple of days before this, about a week or two before in America in comic book stores. But anyway, Amazon have it. That's probably the cheapest way to get it. I think it's available digitally. I think there's like a kind of Kindle version or something like that for Amazon and stuff like that. So there's multiple ways to get it. This is the hardback. There's a paperback, which is a little bit cheaper. I think the content is the exact same. I think it's literally just the hardcover presentation or not. But yeah, other than that, that has been the review. Thanks for watching, and bye.